At dusk, the Manhattan skyline glittered like a constellation of ambition, each window a story, each light a promise. Ethan Caldwell stood alone on the terrace of a swanky rooftop restaurant, the cool breeze ruffling his cashmere coat. Below, the city throbbed with life, but the opulence of his empire rang hollow. A single father's love, buried beneath the triumphs of the boardroom, had become an afterthought. Then he saw her, a familiar silhouette on the crowded sidewalk. His ex-wife, hunched in despair, holding the hands of her two young daughters, girls he had never known. Their faces, half hidden by the streetlights, stirred a storm in his chest. How had his perfect world come crashing down so completely? What truth lay behind his own silence? As the horizon slowly fades into dusk, a question pops into his mind. What secrets is this millionaire single dad hiding? Follow Millionaire Story TV to discover Ethan's hidden truth. Late autumn light filters through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Caldwell's sleek corner office, painting the polished mahogany desk in shades of amber and gold. At 38, he has built a tech empire from scratch, orchestrating deals in boardrooms that echo with applause and ambition. Yet today, as he leans back in his tailored leather chair, the hum of New York City feels distant, an indistinct backdrop to the emptiness that lingers in his chest. Claire, his ever-efficient assistant, appears at the doorway with a steaming cup of Ethiopian roast. She offers it without a word. Ethan manages only a curt nod. Behind her professional calm, he senses the question she's skirting. How long will you let this hollow ache define you? He forces a polite smile, takes the cup, but barely tastes the coffee. His gaze drifts to the skyline, where skyscrapers pierce the somber sky like steel spires. Success surrounds him, yet something vital is missing. Memories flicker, late nights at home, rocking a newborn in silence, while emails and conference calls pulled at his attention like gravity. Lila's soft voice, pleading for him to stay present, echoes in his mind. He remembers the day she left, her eyes shimmering with disappointment as she packed a single suitcase, their infant daughters clasped to her side. His ambition had whispered that sacrifice was required. He'd listened. And then, divorce papers signed, congratulations sent from PR, and the world carried on, except for the 3 lives he abandoned. His phone buzzes, a reminder to attend the evening's grand opening of his new upscale restaurant just below. He straightens his tie, smooths the creases in his charcoal suit, and sets the coffee down without a second thought. Material comforts have become routine. The real surprises, those that steal the breath, come unannounced. Moments later, Ethan descends the private elevator into the restaurant's hushed elegance. Velvet banquettes flank tables set with crystal and silver. Warm light reflects off polished glass, creating a halo of anticipation. As he steps onto the dining room's terrace to survey the city lights, Claire's earlier question seems trivial next to the jolting image forming on the street below. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, he sees a familiar figure huddled near a lamppost. Lila, her shoulders hunched against the chill. At her side, 2 little girls clutch her hands, twin shadows in matching pink coats, faces tilted upward as if pleading for something beyond her grasp. Their hair curls in identical ringlets, their eyes wide with a quiet resignation. Ethan's breath catches. It can't be them. He hurries to the window, instincts in overdrive. Lila's face flicks sideways. She glances up, meeting his gaze. Shock ripples across her expression, and the girls turn, their features mirroring his own. Emma's bright blue eyes, Sophie's soft, stunned gaze, 2 halves of his soul he never knew existed. For 5 years, he lived under the illusion that his family was gone forever. Now they stand before him, asking for help he never provided. The world seems to stop. The clink of silverware, the muted chatter of patrons, even the soft strains of the pianist inside. Everything fades to silence. Ethan's heart pounds so fiercely he fears it will shatter his ribs. Questions race. Why did she keep them hidden? What hardships drove her to this desperation? And most urgently, how can he reclaim the years stolen from his daughters? Claire's voice cuts through the haze. "Mr. Caldwell, are you all right?" She places a gentle hand on his arm, grounding him in the present. He forces himself to blink, rubs the back of his neck, and swallows hard. "Claire, call security," he manages, voice rough. She hesitates, aware that security could do more harm than good, then nods and slips away. Ethan steps onto the terrace, each breath catching on the cold air. His tailored shoes scrape the stone floor as he approaches the glass. He wants to dash outside, to scoop his daughters into his arms, to demand every explanation. But caution holds him back, mixed with regret, guilt, and a fragile hope that this moment could be the first step toward redemption. He watches Lila cradle Emma's trembling hand, whispering reassurances he cannot hear. Sophie tugs at her mother's coat, looking to Ethan as if wondering if this stranger in the penthouse belongs to them. Ethan's resolve hardens. Tonight marks more than a restaurant opening. It heralds the reopening of a life he closed off years ago. As the city lights gleam beneath him, Ethan realizes that success and luxury no longer define him. Love does. The mystery of his daughter's existence, the questions of Lila's silence, and the chance to rewrite the past all converge in this silent tableau. He inhales deeply, steeling himself for whatever comes next. With the faint clink of security radios below, Ethan turns back toward the doorway, heart racing with possibilities. The empty throne of his empire can wait. Now, he must step into a new chapter, one where secrets unravel, truths emerge, and a single dad millionaire fights for the family he never knew he had. Ethan pushes open the door of the Maple Leaf Diner a few minutes before 9. The bell above the entrance jingles, and a wave of warm air scented with coffee and maple syrup greets him. He glances down at his watch. Autumn sunlight slants through stained glass windows, painting the linoleum floor in amber stripes. He's here on Lila's invitation, heart pounding with anticipation and guilt in equal measure. He spots them in the corner booth. Lila, bundled in a tailored camel wool coat, sits with her back straight despite the two little girls squirming on either side of her. Emma, with her bright eyes and inquisitive frown, fiddles with the edge of the table, while Sophie tucks a curl behind her ear, stealing glances at Ethan as though he were a stranger in an old photograph. Lila meets his gaze and offers a tentative smile, equal parts apology and hope. He slides into the booth across from them. Claire's stiff professionalism has nothing on the hush that falls over the diner table. Emma leans forward, whispering to Sophie, and both burst into giggles when Ethan clears his throat. He forces a warm tone. "I'm glad you asked me here," he says, voice soft. "I've missed you all." Lila's lips quiver. She reaches for Emma's hand first, then Sophie's. "Thank you for coming," she replies quietly. "I wanted you to see them, to really see them, before we made any decisions." As the waitress approaches, Ethan orders 3 hot chocolates and 4 orders of blueberry pancakes, 1 plate for each of them, plus an extra for Lila. He watches the girls beam, their small faces lighting up, and for the first time since he learned of their existence, genuine warmth unfurls in his chest. While they wait, Ethan studies Lila's profile. Beneath the strength he remembers, there's a trace of the woman who once loved him fiercely. A softness around her eyes, a wistful line at her temples. He clears his throat again. "Lila, I never knew they existed. I should have asked. I should have fought to stay." His confession hangs in the air like autumn mist. Lila's eyes glisten. "I hid them because your world moved too fast. Boardrooms and investors, deadlines and travel. When Emma and Sophie were born, you were building an empire. I thought they'd be safer away from that storm." She pauses, glancing at the girls. "For 5 years, I kept them alive on nothing but love and cafeteria jobs. I didn't want them to be another casualty of your ambition." Ethan's throat tightens. The waitress arrives with pancakes stacked like golden crowns and mugs steaming with cocoa whipped into peaks. The girls squeal in delight, cutting into clouds of batter. Ethan reaches across and tucks a napkin into Sophie's collar, then passes a fork to Emma. He catches Lila watching him, her gaze a mixture of relief and lingering uncertainty. They eat in companionable silence, broken only by the occasional, "More syrup, please," or the girls' chatter about school and painting. Lila relaxes as the minutes pass, her shoulders losing their tension. When the plates are empty, Ethan scoops up the bill and slips a generous tip under the waitress's plate, then stands and extends his hand. Emma and Sophie tumble out of the booth to join him. Outside, the air is crisp enough to make their breaths visible. Lila hands Ethan 2 tiny gloves. "You'll need these," she says. He pulls them on and scoops Emma into his arms, balancing Sophie on his hip. The girls wrinkle their noses at the cold and cling to him, chattering about jumps and leaf piles. Lila falls into step beside them, her coat brushing against his sleeve. A few blocks away, Central Park welcomes them with a riot of autumn color: scarlet maples, golden oaks, and bronze elms. A canopy of fallen leaves crunches beneath their feet. Emma grabs Lila's hand and drags her toward a bench overlooking the pond. Sophie tugs Ethan toward a circle of ducks gliding across mirrored water. He crouches to their level and offers crumbs from his pocket. Sophie squeals as a duck noses her hand, while Emma laughs, running rings around them both. Ethan feels a lightness he hasn't known in years. He watches Lila kneel beside the bench, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. Their eyes meet across the pond's silvery ripple, and for a moment he sees the pain that lingered in Lila's heart, the lonely nights of single parenting, the sting of carrying their shared loss alone. He longs to erase it all. He scoops Sophie onto his shoulders and strides toward the leaf pile Lila pointed out. She watches him, amusement flickering in her gaze, as he stomps and tosses leaves into the air. Emma squeals and joins in, and soon all 4 of them are dancing through swirling color. Lila stands back, smiling, hands tucked into her coat pockets. Ethan notices a flicker of something unreadable in her expression. Joy, yes, but also a guarded caution. When the laughter dies down, they settle on a park bench. Ethan lets Sophie crawl into his lap, while Emma leans against his side, resting her head on his arm. Lila sits beside them, folding her hands in her lap. They are a family in miniature, framed by the russet landscape. Ethan slips an arm around Lila's shoulders, and she leans against him. He studies her face, gentle, vulnerable, luminous in the dappled sunlight. "They're incredible," he whispers. "I never imagined how much joy, how much love." He pauses as Lila presses a hand to her chest. "I'm sorry," he adds. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Lila turns to him, her eyes misty. "I needed to know you wanted them beyond guilt. I needed to know you loved me enough to share their lives." She exhales slowly. "I've carried so much pain, Ethan. The nights I didn't know how we'd make rent. The fear I wasn't enough." He tilts her chin, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "You were more than enough. You still are." His words tremble with sincerity. "I want to make up for every moment I missed, if you'll let me." She searches his eyes, and for an instant, her walls drop. He glimpses the woman he once knew, brave, compassionate, and yearning for partnership. Then she looks away, folding her hands tighter. Before he can ask what's wrong, his phone buzzes. He glances down. It's David, his oldest friend and business confidant. The message reads, "Saw you at the restaurant yesterday. We need to talk. Call me." Ethan's chest tenses. He stands slowly, helping Sophie and Emma to their feet. Lila notices the shift. "Is everything okay?" she asks. Ethan slips his phone into his pocket. "It's just David. He's concerned." He offers a reassuring smile. "He wants to catch up." Lila nods, but her gaze flickers with worry. "Of course. We'll finish this later?" Her voice is hopeful, yet strained. He nods and turns toward the exit. Emma and Sophie trail behind him, holding hands and skipping. In the distance, Lila watches them go, framed by autumn's last blaze of color. Ethan walks toward the path leading out of the park, the girls chattering at his side, but his mind races with David's warning. Concerned about what? And why now? As they approach the avenue, the city's hum returns. A reminder that the world outside their moment still spins at its relentless pace. Ethan pauses, looking back at Lila's solitary figure under the elm tree. He wonders what burdens she still carries, what secrets she's yet to share, and whether his presence can truly heal old wounds or stir new doubts. He takes a deep breath, steadies himself, and strides toward his car. In the crisp air, with Sophie's laughter at his back and Emma's hand in his, he feels love's stirring promise, tempered by the faint shadow of uncertainty. What mysteries lie beneath Lila's smile? And will trust be enough to bridge the chasm of years lost? The answer awaits, but for now, Ethan holds his daughters close, determined to discover the truth together. The rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Caldwell's corner office, each drop tracing a jagged path down the glass like a fleeting confession. Inside, the room was suffused in the harsh glow of monitors and polished chrome. An aesthetic he had once thought triumphant, now felt like a mausoleum of ambition. Outside, the storm's electric fury threw lightning bolts across the darkened Manhattan skyline. Inside, Ethan hunched over his desk, a man on the brink of unraveling. He'd come in late, seeking refuge in work after the morning's jolting revelation. His phone lay face up, screen cracked at the corner from a careless fall. For 5 years, it had been silent save for work calls and appointment reminders. Tonight, it buzzed incessantly. He lifted it, eyes scanning an avalanche of missed calls. 23 from an unknown number labeled blocked caller, plus a dozen texts marked undelivered. Beneath them, a single voicemail. A soft voice he recognized instantly. Lila's voice. 5 years ago. His breath caught. He pressed play, heart hammering as her tone, tender, sorrowful, cracked with desperation. Ethan, it's me. I'm not asking for much, just a moment. Please, when you hear this, know that or rather we, are okay. I love you, Ethan. Then nothing. The call had cut off. The text messages contained little more than broken phrases. They're safe. I forgive you. Please. Them. All undelivered. All blocked. He scrolled up, fury and regret colliding. Why hadn't he known? Why had Claire, his former assistant, silenced her? He rose, knocking papers to the floor. His suit jacket hung empty on the chair. He strode to the bay window, the storm played accompaniment to his racing thoughts. Images of Lila trembling in a hospital corridor, hand pressed against her swollen belly, flashed unbidden. The day she tried reaching him, when Emma and Sophie were born, he'd been in mid-pitch to venture capitalists, convinced he could postpone fatherhood until his empire was unassailable. Claire, ever the gatekeeper, had told him there were no urgent messages. Tonight he learned the truth. She had lied. His phone buzzed again. This time a text from David. Can we talk tomorrow? Urgent. D. David, his oldest friend and sounding board in every boardroom crisis, sensed something was wrong. Ethan pocketed the device and let out a low groan. He would have to face Claire. He would have to face Lila. But first, he needed air. He grabbed his tailored overcoat and strode toward the elevator, shoulders squared even as guilt coiled in his gut. 20 floors down, the lobby felt cavernous. The storm's roar muffled beneath marble arches and hushed voices of security guards. He slipped past them into the drizzle, ignoring their calls. The cold rain struck his face like truth itself, sharp, uncomfortable, cleansing. He conjured an address from memory. Lila's modest apartment in Harlem, a place he hadn't visited since their divorce. He hailed a cab, climbed in, and watched the city blur through the soaked windows. Inside the yellow taxi, he cradled his phone like a talisman. He dialed Lila's number, the very number that had once been blocked, and waited, rings, finally, a click. Hello? Her voice was smaller now, breathless. Ethan? He closed his eyes. Lila, I'm coming up. The cab wove through thunderlit streets. With each turn, Ethan's heart pounded louder than the windshield wipers. Memories flooded. Their wedding day in Central Park, her cheeks wet with tears of joy. The first time she'd called him Ethan the Dreamer at dawn, bringing coffee in bed. The night she'd whispered her plans for the twins, dreams that had fallen silent in his relentless climb. By the time the cab stopped outside a red brick walk-up, he was unsteady. On the third floor, the hallway lights were dim, the paint faded. Ethan's knuckles rapped on Lila's door. Seconds later, it swung open to reveal her. Hair unbound, dark eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, cheeks hollowed by worry. In her arms was Emma, wrapped in a soft pink blanket. Sophie clung to her leg, big eyes shining with cautious hope. "Ethan," Lila whispered, voice steadying. She looked small under the heavy downpour dripping through his coat. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to see you," he said, stepping past her into the narrow foyer. He set down his briefcase and peeled off his coat, rainwater splattering on the tiled floor. "Why didn't you reach out?" I've been chasing ghosts." Her lips trembled. "I tried. Every time I called, Claire, blocked me. I left messages. I wrote letters. They piled up, unread. By the time I realized, you'd already signed the papers." She motioned him into the living room, where peeling wallpaper framed a sagging couch. A single lamp cast a pool of golden light. Ethan knelt before Emma and Sophie, kneeling on the threadbare rug. They stared at him, two halves of his heart, the proof of a love he'd forsaken. He reached out a trembling hand. Sophie touched his finger. Emma offered a shy smile. He swallowed. "I failed you," he breathed. "I'm so sorry." Lila sank onto the couch, drawing the girls to her side. "You have a choice now, Ethan. You can let this ruin everything, or you can step up." He looked at his children, each blink a lifetime of lost moments. "I swear I will be the father you deserve," he vowed. "I'll move mountains to make this right." Lila's eyes flickered with relief, then hardened with something else, hesitation. But before she could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from David. "Meet me at the office, 30 minutes. Beneath, another line. "Something you need to know about Lila." Ethan's chest tightened. "I have to go," he said, voice rough. He kissed each daughter on the forehead, then turned to Lila. "I'll make this right," he whispered. "I promise." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I'll be here." He slipped out into the rain, heart split between two worlds. The walk to his car felt endless, each footstep echoing doubt. By the time he reached his sedan, he was drenched and weary, but resolve glowed in his chest. He drove through the storm toward the corporate tower that held his empire, and, possibly, a new betrayal. When Ethan stepped back into the lobby, the marble seemed colder than before. The storm outside felt distant now, swallowed by fluorescent lights and the hum of the HVAC system. He rode the elevator to the executive floor, mind racing ahead to David's revelations. At his office door, he paused, gathering himself before knocking lightly. "Enter." David's deep voice beckoned. Inside, David stood by the window, umbrella in hand, water dripping from his collar. He turned, expression grave. "I'm sorry I dragged you here," he said. "I wish the news were better." Ethan braced himself. "Tell me." David retrieved a manila folder from his briefcase and laid it on the desk. Inside were eviction notices, overdue utility bills, and handwritten notes from collections agencies, all addressed to Lila Caldwell. One statement summarized a crushing debt: back rent for her apartment, hospital bills from the twins' birth, car repossession fees. Ethan's brow furrowed. But she said she was managing with odd jobs. David tapped a folder labeled Confidential, stamped with Ethan's company logo. I did some digging. Your former assistant, Claire, mentioned Lila's finances to me in passing. She felt guilty. She told me Lila was behind on rent, facing foreclosure. Claire gave her small cash gifts, tried to hide it, but couldn't keep up. I paid attention because I know how you feel about responsibility, but I also know that some people see a billionaire's return as a lifeline. A slow dread crept through Ethan. Are you suggesting she approached me for money? His voice was barely a whisper. David met his gaze unflinchingly. I'm not accusing her. I don't know her heart. But these documents show desperation. Bills piling up. No welfare assistance, no family support. If she believed you were gone, she survived. Now that you're back, she may see an opportunity. He paused. I thought you should know. Anger flared in Ethan's chest, hot as the lightning strikes he'd watched from his office. Betrayal cut him sharper than any storm. Lila's soft apology felt like a wafer beside the hard proof of her need. He clenched his fists. When she called, when she wrote, Claire blocked her. All of it. His voice cracked. I trusted Claire to protect me. Now I wonder what else I've been blind to. David laid a steadying hand on Ethan's shoulder. You've been focused on building a world. Now you're facing the world you left behind. He turned the papers toward Ethan. Take your time. Find out for yourself. You owe that to them. And to you. Ethan sank into his chair, eyes on the folder. The storm outside had eased to a dull drumming. Inside, the thunder rolled on. He thought of Emma's wide smile, Sophie's curious gaze, Lila's trembling apology. Torn between the fierce love he felt and the shadow of doubt David had cast, Ethan realized the path ahead would be neither simple nor gentle. He exhaled, voice low. I'll get to the bottom of this. His vow carried the weight of a man determined to rebuild broken bridges, or burn them down. He rose, gathering the folders. Thank you for telling me. David nodded solemnly. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Ethan headed for the door, pausing to look back at the skyline beyond the glass. The city lights fought the clouds, promising both shelter and secrets. Clutching the evidence of Lila's hardship and potential motive, he stepped into the night, ready to confront the woman he once loved and the truth he feared to learn. As he descended the elevator, the reality settled like cold rain. The first real conflict of his second chance had begun. Now, he would need all his power, and perhaps something more vulnerable, to prove his worth as a father and to untangle the mystery of Lila's heart. The storm inside him raged fiercest of all. Late winter in New York City arrived on brittle winds and slate-gray skies, frosting the pavement with a thin sheen of ice. Ethan Caldwell stepped into his law firm's private conference room, walls lined with leather-bound folios and diplomas, sweater collar turned up against the chill. On the polished oak table lay a stack of court filings so clinically precise they could have been blueprints for his own downfall. His pulse throbbed as he scanned the header. Caldwell v. Caldwell Supreme Court, Family Division. The date of filing, 2 weeks ago. The first page bore Lila's name in bold type, followed by the gravest accusation he could imagine. She sought full custody of Emma and Sophie, alleging his unavailability and neglect had endangered their welfare. The next document quantified her demand: a monthly child support payment that would drain his personal accounts, reimburse her sacrificial sole parenthood, plus legal fees. Ethan's hands shook so violently the pages blurred. With a strangled groan, he flipped the stack and found signature lines seemingly signed by Lila's hand. An elegant, flowing script he recognized, and one he also knew to be impossible, because Lila had never once signed a document in his presence after the divorce. Memories roared to life. The final day in the courthouse lobby, when civil servants had told him there was no custody motion on file. The weeks spent building trust with his daughters. The promise he'd made to Lila that he would protect them both. Now all of it threatened to collapse under the weight of forged allegations. His vision tunneled as frost formed on the window panes outside, and he pressed his trembling fingertips against the cool glass, as if seeking refuge in the city beyond. A soft knock on the door jolted him from his disorientation. "Ethan?" came the anxious voice of his lawyer, Marjorie Dunn. Tall and crisp in a charcoal suit, she closed the door and crossed to stand beside the table. "I'm so sorry you have to see this," she said, voice measured. "The filings are indisputable on their face. The court clerk confirms receipt and scheduled a preliminary hearing in 8 days. They cite your work schedule, frequent travel, and private school tuition payments as evidence you're prioritizing career over custody." She guided him to a seat, her gaze steady. "We'll petition to strike the motion for fraud on its face, but procedurally, we have to answer." Ethan closed his eyes, anguish pooling in his chest. She didn't tell me. How could she?" His voice cracked with more hurt than rage. "I would have..." He swallowed the remainder. "Lila wouldn't do this. Not after everything." Marjorie placed a supportive hand on his arm. "For now, gather any correspondence or texts you have from her over the past year. We'll build the case that she's never signaled any intent to challenge custody. Until now." He nodded numbly, rising as if disowned by his own body. Clutching the documents, he left the room in a daze, pulling on his overcoat as the winter wind stung his exposed face. He hailed a cab without remembering the address he gave. The city lights streaked past, mirroring the turmoil that churned inside him. Confusion, betrayal, desperation. His phone buzzed with a text from David. "Heard about the custody docs. Lunch?" Ethan stared at the message, torn between relief at David's concern and suspicion that this too was part of an orchestrated scheme. That evening, Ethan arrived at Emma and Sophie's elementary school just as parents were gathering in the hallway for the winter recital. Clutching the court filings in one hand, he scanned the frosted windows and decorated bulletin boards. Children in sparkly hats and sequined capes filed into the auditorium, the air thick with anticipation. Lila stood near the stage entrance, cheeks flushed, breath rising in small clouds. She caught his eye and offered a quick, nervous smile. No sign she knew anything of the legal bombshell about to detonate his life. He took a seat at the back, unloading the twins' little backpacks with a tenderness that belied the ache in his soul. Emma planted herself at his side. Sophie hopped onto his lap. "Daddy," Emma whispered, her breath warm against his neck. "I'm a snowflake today." Sophie nodded vigorously, nearly bouncing with excitement. Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness that pushed aside the legal threat, at least for a moment. He smoothed Sophie's hair and gave Emma's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You'll be the prettiest snowflake in the whole city," he murmured. The lights dimmed and a hush fell. Tiny figures took the stage, white tutus and glittering tights, each child flapping arms like wings of frost. Lila slipped in beside him, her eyes shining. "I was worried you'd be too busy," she admitted, voice soft. "I know things at work are intense." Ethan laid a folder on his lap, but resisted the urge to draw attention to it. Instead, he swallowed the turmoil and focused on the girls, their earnest faces illuminated by the spotlight. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," he whispered, folding the folder under his jacket. As the twins danced in choreographed unison, Ethan felt the familiar warmth of paternal pride and the electric thrill of watching Lila beam at their accomplishments. The world beyond the auditorium, the frigid wind, the looming custody suit, receded into the background. For 8 precious minutes, they were just a family, connected by laughter and the shared joy of a child's triumph. Lila's hand found his and squeezed it, and he gave a tentative smile that reached his eyes. But as the final bows were taken and applause thundered, Ethan's smile wavered. He recalled Marjorie's words, "Answer the motion for fraud." He remembered the forged signature, the calculated wording, the demand for support that threatened his financial standing. He looked at Lila, unaware she was fighting demons of her own, her carefully composed exterior hiding anxiety about the twins' reaction to their father's sudden mood shift. He removed his hand from hers and took a breath, steeling himself. After the final curtain call, he turned to Lila. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice quiet but firm. Concern flickered across her face as they walked into the empty hallway. The bustle of parents and children thinned until only the muffled hum of cleaning crews remained. Against the backdrop of painted posters and festive garlands, Ethan produced the folder. Lila's breath hitched when she recognized the court seal on the cover. "Ethan, she began, but he held up a hand. "These were filed in court," he said, voice strained. "2 weeks ago. You're seeking full custody, claiming I endangered them. I haven't seen a single letter or call from you. Marjorie says the signature is yours." He exhaled sharply. "Tell me this is a mistake." Lila's eyes widened. "I swear, Ethan, I never—" She covered her mouth with a trembling hand. I had no idea." Tears glistened on her lashes. "I've been trying to protect them, but not like that. I never filed anything. I promised you I wouldn't drag you into a courtroom battle." Ethan's jaw tightened. Then who did? And why? He felt the walls caving in, the shard of doubt that David's warning had planted now driving a wedge between them. She reached for his arm, but he recoiled. "Lila, please. I need to understand." She swallowed, voice trembling. "I don't know. I haven't spoken to any lawyer. I haven't served you with anything." She took a step back, glancing toward the auditorium door as though expecting someone else to emerge. "Ethan, I'm scared." He studied her pale face. No guile there, only genuine fear. His heart stumbled, torn between outrage and tenderness. He wanted to shield her from this nightmare. He wanted to blame her. Instead, he softened, guiding her to a nearby storage closet lined with chairs. They sat on a folding chair, the court papers resting between them like a published lie. "Someone forged these," Lila whispered, voice barely audible over the distant hum. "Someone who knows me. My handwriting." She pressed her fingers to her mouth, as if tasting ink. "Ethan, I promise you, I would never do this to us." He closed his eyes, memories of their first freeze-frame kiss in Central Park, the nights she read bedtime stories to the twins while he worked late, the laughter they'd shared. Those truths clashed violently with the evidence in his hands. He turned to her, voice tight with emotion. "I believe you, but I also can't ignore it. I need to find out who did this, before it destroys everything." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll help. We'll find the truth." She stood, brushing at her coat. "Let's go somewhere warm. We can call Marjorie together." Ethan hesitated, but took her hand. Outside the school, the winter wind had stiffened into sleet. He imagined the girls, waiting backstage for their dad to rejoin them, unaware of the storm raging between their parents. He led Lila to a taxi, opening the door for her, then slid in beside her. Neither spoke as the cab merged into traffic, but his mind whirled with the enormity of the betrayal. First forged custody papers, now the gnawing suspicion that someone coveted more than his heart. They coveted his vulnerability. Back in his office the next morning, Ethan uncovered more discrepancies. A notary's seal that didn't match the official registry, metadata in the scanned PDFs pointing to an IP address traced to his own corporation's network. His chest went cold as realization struck. "These docs—" Silence answered. Then David's tone, smooth but brittle. "That's unexpected. I'll look into it." His pause was too long, weighted. "Listen, Ethan, you need to tread carefully. If this is tied to the merger, one false move and it could tank everything you've built." Ethan's chest tightened with a fresh pang of betrayal. David, his most trusted ally, sounded almost relieved by the corporate implications. "Why would someone in your circle do this?" he asked. There was a rustle on the other end. "I can't. There are things I can't discuss over the phone." David ended the call abruptly. Ethan stared at his reflection in the darkened screen, hollow-eyed, betrayed by both love and friendship. The custody motion that threatened his family, the forged signature that violated his trust, and now the murky suggestion that David might have been complicit. Every bond he had taken for granted felt like glass slipping through his fingers. He powered down his computer and grabbed his coat. The snow had begun to fall outside, dusting the sidewalks in crystalline promise. He needed clarity, answers, and a path forward that would protect Emma and Sophie from the fallout. With the court hearing looming, and the merger deadline faster approaching, he was running out of time to untangle the web woven around his life. As he stepped into the swirling snow, Ethan knew one thing. This war had become far more than a custody dispute. It was a clash of loyalties, between love and ambition, truth and deception, family and empire. And in that bleached white storm, he vowed to unearth every secret, expose every betrayal, and prove that even a billionaire's heart could break and heal when faced with the ultimate test of faith. Early spring sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Caldwell's corner office, casting long, pale shadows across his polished oak desk. The city beyond was waking from winter's slumber, buds unfurling on bare branches, the honk of morning traffic carrying a hint of warmth. Yet inside, Ethan felt the air still thick with tension. For weeks he'd been chasing ghosts of forged court papers, suspicious emails, and David's evasive phone calls. Today, he resolved, the mystery would end. He rose from his leather chair and crossed to the bank of servers humming quietly along the wall. Pulling on latex gloves, Ethan accessed the internal logs, a maze of timestamps, IP addresses, and user credentials. His pulse quickened as he traced the forged custody motion's digital signature back to an off-hours login. David's private account. David Caldwell, his closest friend and corporate consigliere, had used his executive privileges to inject falsified documents into the family court system. Ethan stared at the screen, his breath caught between rage and disbelief. Before he could dive deeper, his phone buzzed. Caller ID flashed, Claire Harper. Claire, his former assistant, had quietly rejoined his team 3 weeks ago to help him juggle the chaos of work and family. He swiped to answer. Ethan? Claire's voice came soft, edged with concern. I think I found something you should see. Emails between David and our IT department. He was pushing for emergency access protocols, claiming a security breach. But look at the timestamps. They coincide exactly with the court filings. Ethan slid into his chair, bringing up the email chain. Neatly formatted memos from David to IT, imploring them to override multi-factor authentication and expedite a privileged user login. The next line, urgent family matter, confidential. Beneath it, a forwarded attachment, an innocuous PDF that, with a few lines of code insertion, became the forged custody motion. Ethan closed his eyes, head bowed. How many nights had he lain awake, wondering who had violated his life? The answer was now clear, and the betrayal burned hotter than any boardroom failure. Claire, thank you, he said, voice low. Can you preserve everything? I need copies, printouts, the whole chain of custody. And keep this under tight wraps. No one outside this room. I understand, Claire replied. I'll meet you at Lila's place in an hour. You wanted to talk to her? Ethan stood and straightened his tie in the reflection of the monitor. Yes, it's time she knew the truth. A brisk wind rattled the entrance door of Lila's modest townhouse as Ethan arrived. Built of red brick and ivy-clad walls, the home exuded warmth and resilience. The very qualities he feared had been imperiled. He found Lila in the kitchen, elbows deep in dishwater suds, Emma and Sophie perched on bar stools, coloring pages of rainbows and kittens. At the sound of his knock, Lila dried her hands and exchanged a knowing glance with the twins. Ethan, she greeted him softly, wiping her palms on her apron. I wasn't expecting you so soon. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender soap and fresh linen reminding him of happier days. Pulling a manila envelope from his coat pocket, he placed it on the counter. These emails came through this morning, he said, voice steady but taut. I traced them back to David. Lila's eyes widened, Sophie slid off her stool and wrapped herself around Lila's leg. Emma climbed down to stand beside her mother. Ethan drew a breath. David forged the custody motion and used company systems to file it. He knew you never submitted anything, yet he tried to seize control of our family for his own ends. Tears glistened in Lila's eyes as she reached for the envelope. I never would have done this, she whispered, scanning the printouts. I never even knew about the filings until you told me. A tremor shook her voice. Why would David do this? To protect… what? The merger? The board? Everything he built? Ethan's jaw clenched. I think he saw an opportunity to destabilize me personally, to make me less capable of leading the company he covets. By threatening my family, he could push me out or force me to resign, leaving a void he could fill. He pulled out a printed email. David quoting a vote of no confidence among key investors. He suspected I'd prioritize custody over corporate strategy. He wanted to ensure I did. Lila closed the folder, her hand trembling. He's been whispering in my ear too, she confessed, saying he worried about the twins growing up fatherless, that he should protect them if you couldn't. I thought he was just worried, but now I see those words were poison. Sophie reached up and poked Ethan's leg. Why did Uncle David say that, Daddy? Her innocent question cut through the tension. Ethan knelt to meet her gaze, heart swelling with protective affection. Because Uncle David got confused, he lied gently, brushing her hair back. Sophie nodded, satisfied, and ran to Emma, who wrapped her arms around her sister. Lila looked on, tears brimming. Ethan rose and held out his hand to Lila. She took it, her grip firm despite the swirl of emotions. We've been through too much to let his lies win, he said quietly. I promise I'll clear your name. Our name. We'll go to court together and expose every forgery. Then we'll show Emma and Sophie that their father and mother are a team, stronger than any betrayal. Lila nodded, her shoulders straightening. Yes, together. Over the next 3 days, Ethan and Claire worked in tandem. Claire gathered logs, printed emails, and simulated the false filings to demonstrate how David's actions bypassed normal channels. Ethan met with Marjorie to prepare a motion to vacate the fraudulent custody order, and to file a civil suit against David for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. Every document laid bare the chain of deceit: digital fingerprints, login records, and David's own internal memos. Late on the third evening, Ethan confronted David in the gleaming boardroom atop Caldwell Enterprises. The city lights winked below, oblivious to the storm climbing within these walls. David sat at the head of the long mahogany table, hands folded, eyes sharp. David, Ethan began, voice controlled. He placed a thick file in front of him. Email chains, IT logs, court filings. These prove you orchestrated a scheme to forge custody documents in my name, using company systems to file them. Why? David's face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, closed it, then met Ethan's gaze. You think you have proof, he said at last, tone brittle. I was only trying to help. Your hands were tied. If you didn't respond to her demands, someone else would step in. I did what I thought was best for the family. And the company. Ethan's fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. You call forging legal documents help? You weaponized my children's welfare to manipulate me. His voice rose. This isn't protection. It's sabotage. David sprang up, pacing behind the table. You're too soft, Ethan. You prioritize family over shareholders. Board members are whispering doubts. They want strength, not sentimentality. If you do what's necessary, leave Lila, focus on business, we could secure the merger, drive growth. Ethan stood as well, chest heaving. You used our children as a pawn. You broke every vow of friendship, family, and decency. I'm taking you to court, civil and criminal. And I'm going to rebuild my life on my own terms. David's mouth twisted in anger. Don't think you can do this alone. You need me. Ethan shook his head. No, I need the truth. I need my family. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. With that, he turned on his heel and strode from the boardroom, leaving David to stare at the open file in stunned silence. That evening, back at Lila's home, Ethan found her tucking the twins into their pink canopy bed. The room was fragrant with lavender and bedtime storybooks lined the shelves. Emma lay back against the headboard, clutching her favorite stuffed cat. Sophie nestled under the quilts, eyes heavy with sleep. Lila rose as Ethan entered the doorway, face both exhausted and resolute. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. The twins stirred, looking up at him with sleepy curiosity. "Emma, Sophie." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have something important to tell you." The sisters sat up, eyes bright. He took a deep breath. "You both know I'm your dad, right?" Emma nodded gravely. "Yes, Daddy." Sophie wrapped her arms around his neck. "We love you, Daddy." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "I've been away too much. And someone tried to tell a lie that I wasn't your father, or that I didn't love you. But that's not the truth. I'm going to stay right here from now on. Mommy and we're going to be a family together. Always." Tears glistened in Lila's eyes as she pressed a kiss to each girl's forehead. The twins reached for their mother's hand and then surrounded Ethan in a group hug so fierce it made him stumble against the headboard. He wrapped them tight, the three of them swaying under the canopy of the nightlight's glow. In that moment, the storm of deceit and betrayal receded, replaced by the soft certainty of belonging. Lila joined the embrace, and they stood as one, father, mother, and daughters, bonded by love that no scheme or sabotage could sever. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the executive floor with a determined stride. The board meeting was set to finalize the long-anticipated merger, but he carried a new agenda. He found the assembled directors waiting, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. At the head of the table, Marjorie and Claire stood beside him, holding the documents that would expose David's misdeeds. "Thank you all for convening on such short notice," Ethan began, voice calm and authoritative. "Before we discuss shareholder resolutions, there's a matter of corporate governance that demands our attention." He laid the evidence on the table. "Our former chief legal officer, Mr. David Caldwell, orchestrated a fraudulent scheme to undermine my family, and by extension, the company's leadership, by forging personal legal documents using corporate resources." Murmurs rippled around the table. Ethan lifted a hand for silence. "This behavior constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and misappropriation of company assets. Effective immediately, I recommend his termination from all corporate positions and the appointment of Miss Claire Harper as interim general counsel. Furthermore, I will be restructuring my own role, transitioning from hands-on CEO to executive chairman, to ensure I can devote the necessary attention to both the company's strategic vision and my responsibilities as a father." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "I believe this structure will balance growth and governance with the human values that define our corporate culture. I ask for your support and vote of confidence to move forward." One by one, the directors nodded, impressed by his clarity and leadership. A formal vote was called. The motion passed unanimously. As Claire and Marjorie finalized the paperwork, Ethan felt a deep sense of relief. He had reclaimed his family and secured the company's future on ethical grounds. That evening, as golden light filtered through budding magnolias outside Lila's home, Ethan arrived for a family dinner he'd insisted on cooking himself. Laughter and clinking plates greeted him when he entered the kitchen, Lila slicing vegetables, Claire helping with the table setting, Emma and Sophie setting out placemats. Ethan took his place at the stove, stirring a pot of homemade tomato soup. He glanced at Lila, who caught his eye and smiled. Her first genuine smile in days. The twins giggled over a spilled carton of milk, and even Claire looked relaxed, a testament to the restored order among them. When they sat down to eat, Ethan raised his glass of lemon. The midday sun warmed the cobblestones of Brooklyn's brownstone courtyard as Ethan Caldwell drew a deep breath, glancing around at the fluttering streamers and picnic tables laden with pastel cakes and lemonade pitchers. Summer had arrived in full bloom. Rose bushes spilled over iron trellises, fireflies danced in the periphery, and the soft cacophony of children's laughter drifted down the block. Today was Emma and Sophie's 6th birthday, a milestone Ethan had sworn never to miss again. He stepped gingerly through the crowd of smiling neighbors and business associates, but the corner of his eye remained fixed on Lila. She stood by the buffet table, sunlight glinting in her chestnut hair, supervising last-minute details with a calm efficiency that belied her earlier nerves. Their eyes met, and she offered a tentative smile that carried both relief and something more tender. The knowledge that he had kept his promise. Ethan's tailored linen shirt felt heavy against his skin, not from heat but from the gravity of the choice he was about to announce. Earlier that morning, he had called an emergency board meeting of Caldwell Enterprises. With Claire and Marjorie at his side, he relinquished day-to-day control, stepping down from CEO to executive chairman. He spoke plainly of the need to be present for his daughters, of the emptiness he felt in empty boardrooms, and of the family he finally understood was his true legacy. The board, inspired by his candor and buoyed by a record year, applauded. As he left the skyscraper for this courtyard, he felt lighter than he had in a decade. Now, with balloons swaying overhead and Sophie tugging his hand impatiently, he knew there was one last surprise he had to share. He made his way across the lawn, where Emma and Sophie stood more statuesque than their usual exuberance. Today they wore matching sundresses in shades of lavender, their curls pinned back with tiny flower clips. Both grinned when Ethan knelt before them, and Sophie wrapped her arms around his neck. "Daddy!" Emma exclaimed, planting a kiss on his cheek. "We want the pink cake first." He ruffled Sophie's hair. "Pink cake first? Absolutely." He stood and scanned the courtyard, heart pounding. "But before we cut cake," he said, raising his voice so the gathering hushed into expectant quiet, "I have something important to share with everyone." Lila drifted to his side, offering silent support as he cleared his throat. "When I re-entered your lives," he began, voice rich with emotion, "I carried ambition like an armor. I believed success was the greatest gift I could give Emma and Sophie. But chasing that armor cost me 5 years of your laughter, your milestones, and, most painfully, your trust." A hush fell. "Today I stepped down from my CEO role. I'm staying on as chairman to oversee strategy, but I'm here to be their father first. No board meeting, no investor call will ever take priority over this family again." He gestured to Lila, who squeezed his hand. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the courtyard seemed to glow a little brighter. The guests murmured in approval. Friends, neighbors, company executives, all bearing witness to Ethan's vow. Emma clapped her hands, Sophie jumped in excitement, and Lila's hand drifted to her heart. Just as the applause began to ripple outward, a voice called his name from the edge of the patio. "Ethan!" He turned to see David Caldwell emerging from beneath the arched trellis, rain-darkened hair still damp from an earlier thunderstorm. The hush deepened. David's presence here was unexpected, given their recent fallout. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. "David," Ethan said coolly, "you weren't invited." David stepped forward, gaze earnest beneath furrowed brows. "I know," he replied, voice steady but trembling. "But I had to come. For Emma and Sophie." He turned to the twins, whose wide eyes registered both excitement and confusion. "Happy birthday, girls." They waved, and David managed a small, uncertain smile before refocusing on Ethan. "I owe you the truth. I'm the one who sabotaged your family. I forged the custody papers. I manipulated the board to push you aside so I could assume control. But I was wrong. Terribly wrong." His shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his guilt had finally crushed him. "I lost sight of what really mattered. And I'd do anything to make it right, to earn your forgiveness and that of your family." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Ethan's pulse thundered. Every instinct told him to reject David outright. But when he glanced at Lila, her eyes soft, her lips parted in surprise, he saw an opening for something larger than resentment. Redemption. David swallowed, voice choked. "I'll resign my remaining positions. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation, and, if you'll let me, I'll be here for Emma and Sophie in any way you see fit." He stepped back, head bowed, awaiting judgment. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Ethan exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. He held out a hand. "Redemption is earned," he said quietly. But today is about forgiveness, about family. He nodded to Lila. She stepped around him and placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. We'll find a way, she said, voice unwavering yet kind. Together. David looked up, tears glistening in his eyes as he accepted the handshake offered by both Ethan and Lila. The courtyard erupted into applause, this time for the courage of three flawed souls choosing love over power. Ethan returned his attention to his daughters. Now, he said with a grin, who's ready for birthday cake? Emma and Sophie squealed and scrambled toward the dessert table, where three-tiered cakes adorned with sugar flowers waited. Parents and guests followed, plates in hand. Lila guided Ethan to a seat beside her as the twins resumed their princess-like delight, licking frosting from tiny fingers. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across rippling leaves, Ethan watched his family bask in simple joy. Emma chasing Sophie around the yard, Lila laughing as she wiped frosting from her daughter's cheek, David kneeling to tie Sophie's sandal. In that moment, Ethan felt richer than any CEO's salary could ever make him. Later, as dusk settled and fireflies winked into life, Ethan took Lila's hand beneath the arbor draped in wisteria. The guests lingered in clusters, drinks in hand, sharing stories of the day. The twins danced between them, spinning and singing a made-up birthday song. Ethan drew Lila close and brushed a stray curl from her face. Thank you, he whispered, voice thick, for standing by me, for reminding me what matters most. Lila's eyes glowed with warmth. Thank you for coming back, she replied, for choosing us. He smiled, cupping her cheek. This is our greatest achievement, he said, glancing at Emma and Sophie. And I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure they know they're loved, more than any fortune. She leaned into his embrace as he swept her into a gentle dance to the soft strains of a neighbor's guitar. The music wove through the night air, a tender soundtrack to a family's second chance. In the backyard's dappled light, among streamers and sunshine and the promise of tomorrow, Ethan and Lila's love was rekindled, stronger, wiser, and more enduring than ever. And as the twins collapsed into giggles at their mother's and father's side, the answers were clear. True wealth is measured not in assets or titles, but in hearts that forgive, hands that hold, and a family bound by the simple, unbreakable power of love. Share this story with your friends in the US to spread the emotion. Follow our channel Millionaire Story TV to discover more dramatic love journeys.